Well, you know the story. As I've said, as we've sung, as I've read, you know the story. People are bringing their children to Jesus. The disciples stop them, and according to Mark, they don't just stop them, they rebuke them. How dare you? Get away. And Jesus says, Jesus, who is indignant, which I think is probably too nice a word, I think he's royally annoyed with the disciples. And he says, don't stop them. Let the children come to me. As children, we come to the kingdom of God. That's how we come to the kingdom of God. And Jesus sits with them and he blesses them. Pats them on their head and sends them on their way. No, I don't think so. I think, of course, each of the Gospels that tells a story tells it for a point, which I'll get to in a second. But I think they tell it that way to get to the point for adults. They left out the part where Jesus spends time with the kids. They left out the conversation he has with them. They left out the questions they have for Jesus. They left out so much in that moment. Because they didn't think it was useful to the point they were making, which is unfortunate. Because that conversation, that very interaction, would make that point much more clear for us and remind us of all of the people, all of the characters we are in this story. So we tell the story. Jesus says, let the children come to me, because it's as children that we come to the kingdom of God, and you won't come to the kingdom unless you come as a child. And so we tell the story for adults as you must be like a child. What does that mean? Not childish, obviously. Are you so sure about that? But childlike. Why not childish? Why not with foolishness and fun? Why not? Again, we've portrayed Jesus as perfectly serious all the time. But if Jesus is human, he has a sense of humor. He has a sense of anger. He has a sense of all of the emotions and things that we do. How else will we connect with Jesus if we don't remember that? How else will we bring Jesus close to us if we don't remember that? But even childlike, yes, we've described it as come to Jesus, come to God, come to the kingdom. Childlike, with a sense of wonder, curiosity, innocence. I'm going to say it this way, unspoiled by life experience, without condition. So many different ways that we could describe that. But of course, we've said, come with one sense of wonder and openness. Openness. Of course. How else will you be ready to engage and welcome and learn? But isn't there more? Isn't there more that is, in fact, perfectly demonstrated by the disciples rebuking them, before Jesus says, no, let them come. It's vulnerability. Children are vulnerable. We try so hard not to be. In fact, the example we set for children teaches them pretty quickly, I think, that vulnerability is weakness. Except it's not. It's just not. Vulnerability is the path to empathy. Vulnerability is willing to put ourselves in a place where we are open fully to another, to their story, to their feelings, to their emotions. Jesus lived a life of that. We talk about all of the other things Jesus teaches us when we're in his life, in how to live. And we seem to quickly pass over the vulnerability part. And then find ourselves wondering how we get to that point that Jesus did where he was able to have empathy for people. Well, it's because he made himself vulnerable to them. He had conversation with them. He engaged them. We also, I think, maybe leap too quickly to Jesus' vulnerability and it is life. But then there's all that business about, well, didn't Jesus know that was going to happen? Wasn't about the sacrifice that Jesus makes for us? Yeah. It's funny, isn't it, how we very quickly move on from the story and about being Jesus to what doctrine and dogma and what the church tells us, what the structures tell us. Here, Jesus tells us to be like a child. To be fully like a child means to be prepared to embrace that vulnerability again. To be open to others. To find a way to have empathy for others, to hear their story. To be able to share our own without fear. We live in a world where we're teaching people that's weakness. We're acting like it's more important to be strong. But the strength of that vulnerability is engagement. It's relationship building. To have a relationship with God and with Jesus, with the kingdom, requires that openness, that sense of wonder and curiosity and all of that stuff, but also vulnerability. Even then, we can't stop there. Because there's still more to this story. Because it isn't just about how we come to Jesus, or we come to God, or we come to the kingdom, or indeed each other, with a sense of wonder and engagement and vulnerability and empathy as a child. We're not just the children in the story. We're Jesus in the story, too. I'm going to say that in a different order because, sadly, we have remarkably failed at being Jesus in this story. We've done very well at being the disciples. We've done very well at being the disciples in this story. But it's Jesus that is in us. It's that spirit of the divine and of the earth. Remember? The life of Jesus teaches us to live that out. The life of Jesus teaches us to be like Jesus. And it's not just that we've kept people from Jesus or the kingdom or from God. We've done worse than that. It's so important to hear the message of this story as the story, not just one little piece of it. It's not just about being open and vulnerable to others. It's being able to welcome that and engage it and honor it. Not put a hand up and stop it. Not take advantage of it in order to have power over others or to hurt others, but to be open to it and welcome it into us as well, that we might understand other people's stories, that we might have empathy with them, that we might share in their brokenness and their hurt and their grief as much as their joy and their childlike foolishness and childishness. There's room for all of that. This story in the Gospel of Mark, this story is like, 4 verses? It's hardly anything. It's a passing moment with an incredibly important and powerful message that we'll only understand if we listen to the whole of the story and be willing to put ourselves in the story as not just as children, but as Jesus, to accept the fact that we have been the disciples and to own the responsibility for that. And hope that as the disciples did, we too will learn from the life of Jesus. It's funny, in the book of Acts, the Acts of the Apostles, the early days of the church, the stories of the disciples. Where's the story of the children coming to Peter? Where's the story of the children coming to Paul or any of the other disciples? Where's the story of how children were welcomed? Are they there and we just left them out? I with all my heart want to believe that, because otherwise the disciples will not have learned this moment. When they learned so much from the life of Jesus. When we can learn so much from the life of Jesus. When we can learn to be so much more of who we are from the life of Jesus. Let's remember too that in this moment we come not only as children to come to Jesus, but we welcome as children as well. We welcome with openness and wonder and curiosity and vulnerability. We are all those